Hey there, listeners. Are you ready to elevate your energy game? Let me introduce you to Dubby, the energy drink brand on a mission to help you be better. Dubby is designed to give you the boost you need without the jitters or crashes that accompany many of the drinks supplied by Big Energy. Their drinks are sugar-free, calorie-free, and free from artificial colors or dyes. They launched with just one flavor, but thanks to the support of their loyal customers, they've grown to offer over 15 unique custom-made flavors. So if you're looking for a clean, delicious energy boost that helps you power through your day, look no further than Dubby. Join the movement and experience the difference for yourself. Visit WGG and use the code WW1POD for a 10% discount on your order. Remember, with Dubby, it's all about being better, one sip at a time. Alright, bills are paid. Let's get on with the show. I'm Henny B, and welcome to the World War I Stories podcast, where history comes alive through the voices of those who lived it. Some scenes in these stories may be too graphic for sensitive listeners, so listener discretion is advised. Today's episode, The Light of Brussels, and I would like to thank my friend Shane for leading me to this story. His hands shook as he looked upward at the rim of the trench. The thunderous roar of artillery fire reverberated through the ground, shaking it violently. He lifted his eyes further to the sky, watching the trails left by the shells racing overhead towards the German lines. If they weren't so deadly, they'd be beautiful, he thought to himself. It was customary to shell an enemy position for hours before initiating a charge. He knew this, but that knowledge didn't make him any less uncomfortable or scared. He stood in a line 3 deep. He was the third. The two men who stood in front of him would go over the top first. He steeled himself as an eerie quiet took hold. The shelling had stopped. The French army had learned the hard way to cease artillery shelling just before charging. One errant shell could decimate an entire division of your own men, and shelling could be unpredictable. If it were accurate, then no man's land would not be littered with shell holes. The silence was short-lived, as he knew it would be, and it was broken with a shrill sound. He knew that sound well now. It was the whistle indicating for the first wave to go over the top. He watched as the man who stood 2 ahead of him crossed himself, pointed to the sky, and started up the ladder to whatever fate awaited him. He watched the man reach the top and disappear into no man's land. A cacophony of gunfire erupted from both sides of the battlefield, and about a minute later, the whistle blew again. He now watched the man in front of him start up the ladder. He didn't cross himself. He didn't point to the sky. He just climbed. Just as the man reached the top, a red mist materialized from his neck. Time seemed to slow down as the man hurtled backwards and into the trench. He sidestepped quickly as the man's body thudded into the mud. He looked down at the man, and his stomach turned when he saw the man's dead eyes staring off into the high, smoke-filled sky as a flurry of raindrops bounced off the dead man's face. André Noel knew that the whistle would blow again, and soon, and it would be his time to go over the top. He gripped his Lebel Model 1886 rifle in his sweaty hands. He briefly considered detaching his bayonet, but the thought of him accidentally impaling a fellow French soldier dissuaded him from doing so. Instead, he stood poised, gazing up the ladder that would carry him to his destiny. The whistle blew, and without any hesitation or further thought, up the ladder he went, his muddy feet feeling heavy on the rungs. Instead of jumping off the top of the ladder and into the battlefield like most of the men, he crawled out, keeping his body low. He lay prone and put the rifle sights to his eye. Maybe he would get lucky and he could take out a German or two. All he could see, however, was men. Men running, men falling, and men already felled. He felt a sharp pain suddenly in his left side. He looked up and saw a sergeant he had never met. "Get up, Private! The Germans are that way!" He started to heed the sergeant's directive, As he rose, he looked at the sergeant as a bullet whizzed forth and struck him in the chest. Then another, and another. The sergeant convulsed and fell to his knees, and then face down into the mud. André, now on his backside, scampered backwards away from the fallen sergeant. His right hand slipped into something sticky and wet. When he turned to see what it was, he was shocked to see that he had put his hand directly into what used to be another man's face, a face that had been obliterated by machine gun fire. He drew back his hand quickly, both in disgust and in abject fear. After a moment, he stood. Better now than never, he thought to himself, and he started to run towards the German lines. As he ran, his mind cleared, and he devised a plan. Out here, it's every man for himself, he thought, and he set his strategy into motion. He spotted another soldier and decided to follow closely, mimicking his route. If that soldier went down, André would stop, drop to the ground, and wait for another comrade to pass by. Then he would get back on his feet and continue, this time using the new soldier who was unaware that he had become André's human shield. His mind was blank. He was reacting strictly on instinct. He watched his current human shield fall backwards with a bullet strike to his left arm. André dropped into a nearby shell hole to await another unsuspecting comrade to run by. It took 30 seconds before he realized that no one was coming, at least not close enough for him to use in his strategy. He sprung out of the hole and sprinted towards the German lines, narrowly missing catching himself on a spool of barbed wire that had been meant to stop people just like him from advancement. Joke's on you, Germans, he thought. He zigzagged his way through the muddy battlefield, desperately trying to avoid bullets, shell holes, and bodies. As he approached the German trenches, he could see other French soldiers dropping into the enemy position, but from his vantage point, he couldn't tell what fate awaited them once they crossed the line. Just 3 feet away from the trench, his foot caught on the severed leg of a fallen soldier, whose allegiance was now irrelevant, and he felt himself propelled forward, soaring through the air. Panic surged within him as he tumbled into the trench. His vision blurred, and then he felt something pierce his upper left chest. A burning sensation followed, and then nothing. The movement woke him. He was being moved, but by who? His eyes fluttered open. Germans. The burning in his upper chest was excruciating. He screamed in pain. He watched helplessly as a man he assumed was a German field doctor readied a syringe and injected him with something. Painkiller, he thought. His eyes, through no force or want of his own, closed, and darkness overtook him again. The moment replayed in his mind. The frantic running, the calculated movements, the sudden trip. He jolted awake just as the memory of falling into the trench surged back. His eyes opened abruptly, and he attempted to sit up, but the pain in his chest made him gasp audibly, forcing him to abandon the effort. He looked around the unfamiliar room. It was large, almost as if it had once been a palace ballroom, but now it was lined with beds, each occupied by another injured soul like himself. He heard voices and strained to look in their direction. German soldiers stationed by the ornate doors at both ends of the room. He threw his head back against the pillow, wincing at the sharp pain that shot through his chest. A figure appeared and created a shadow that covered him, and an unfamiliar yet friendly voice spoke to him in French. "You're awake. How are you feeling?" He looked at her through his slitted eyes and attempted a smile. "You speak French?" He heard the raking of a chair against the floor as she moved it to sit down next to him. "I do. You're in Brussels. The Germans have captured you, just as they have captured this city." Understanding began to emerge in his clouded brain. What had happened? How long have I been here? She gently lifted his head in an effort to fluff his pillow, and she explained. "Upper contusion to the chest, most likely a knife or a bayonet. You've been here a week. What do you remember?" He racked his brain. "I remember going over the top. I remember running. I remember watching men fall all around me and hitting the deck a couple times. I remember getting a hair's breadth away from the German trenches. After that, it's all fuzzy, like it's gone." She smiled at him with a comforting smile. Well, you're here now, safe and sound. She looked at the German soldiers. For now. It was then that he really looked at her. She was older, in her late 40s, he thought, and even though she spoke French fluently, she seemed to have a British lilt to her voice. Where are you from? He asked her. London, but I've been here in Belgium for about 7 years. Before the war? I'm André, and thank you for talking with me. He truly was thankful for a friendly face, especially after he had seen the Germans. He wanted to shake her hand and even started to lift his right arm to do so, but the pain was unbearable, and he winced. She noticed this and reached over his body to touch his right hand herself. My name is Edith Cavell. I'm the head nurse here. We're going to get you all patched up. He looked again at the Germans. Were they sentries? And then what? They take me? She stood from the chair and pushed it back against the wall. It made that loud raking sound again. Not if I can help it. She left him with those words, and he watched as she crossed the room towards the grand ornamental doors. She nodded at the 2 German guards, who promptly opened both doors for her. André found the gesture a bit excessive as she stepped out of the room. Over the next few weeks, even though she was not his regular nurse, Edith would visit him often. He told her of his childhood in Versailles, of his parents being employed in the palace, his father as a head caretaker and his mother as an administrator. They did not live in the palace, he told her, but nearby in some staff quarters. She told him of her childhood in Britain, that she had come to Brussels before but had returned home to care for her ill father. She became a nurse shortly afterwards and started working in London hospitals, and in 1907 she found herself back in Brussels, this time as the matron of a new nursing school, the L'École Belge d'Infirmiers Diplômés, or the Birkendal Medical Institute. He recounted the years in Versailles as he himself prepared to join the ranks of maintenance personnel at the palace. He told her about Sally, the young maiden that he wished to marry when the war ended. That is, if he survived. Each visit from Edith was a breath of fresh air for him. He talked to many of the nurses and even a few doctors during his time, but he didn't open up to them as much as he did to Edith. He often wondered why that is, but would shrug those thoughts off and tell himself to be thankful at least he had someone to confide in. The noise that woke him was intense. He was groggy when he came to, for he was still given small doses of morphine to help him with the pain, but not enough to darken the world for him, and those effects of what he felt now. He saw a man, a fellow patient who had just arrived 3 days ago, standing on his bed. The man looked petrified. The German soldiers were all standing around the bed in battle stances pointing their rifles, which had all been affixed with bayonets. The man was screaming in French, and although he could understand them, André could tell the Germans were unaware of what was being said. André stood up from his bed, still groggy, his left arm and chest still bandaged and in a sling. He walked across the room and addressed the man. My name is André. What is yours? One of the Germans shifted his focus at André's words and turned his gun to him. He said something in German, but André brushed it off. He was focusing on the man on the bed, but to be safe, he did raise his right hand to try to convince the Germans that he was not a threat. He asked the man again, What is your name? The man, clearly panicked, had a bloody bandage around the top of his head and covering his left eye. He had his back to a large window that adorned the wall at the head of his small bed. I'm Jean Dupont of the 87th. André was aware of the French 87th Infantry Division, which was stationed just a mile south of the 45th Infantry Division, to which he belonged, within the same trench system. Had he seen this man before? Maybe in passing? You do not need to panic. These men will not hurt you. These nurses will make you better, he pleaded. Jean turned his head left to right. He was focused on the guns. André, however, spoke no German, so he couldn't ask the soldiers to put them down. Where was Edith when he needed her? Focus on me, not them, Jean. Jean pointed his focus at André now. I need to get out of here. Do you know what these Huns do to prisoners? It's all over the papers back home. I can't be their prisoner. It was then that André noticed that their windows were not barred. Time seemed to slow down as John turned and hurled himself through the glass and into the night air. A German guard quickly maneuvered the small bed out of the way with a shove and pointed his rifle out the window. He pulled the rifle back without firing a shot and stepped back. André cautiously walked towards the window. The Germans did not try to stop him. He learned quickly why. They were on the 4th floor of the building. Jean did not survive the fall. André deduced that the reason the guard pointed the rifle out the window was to put the poor man out of his misery in the event that he did survive. Edith visited him the next evening. This time, they told no stories of their pasts. There was no laughter. There was nothing but the thick feeling of dread and regret. Edith felt that she could have saved Jean had she just been awoken. André dreaded that he would soon go crazy also and possibly push himself to the same fate. After sitting in silence together for what felt like an eternity, Edith cleared her throat. "It's almost time." A curious look crossed André's face. "Time for what?" he asked. She explained that after his actions the evening before, rising up quickly to try to assist Jean, the German military contingent, which was present at the hospital, were convinced that he was healthy enough to transport. He was to be transported to Camp de Saint-Denis, which was about 10 miles north of Brussels. This transport would happen in 3 days' time. He listened intently. How do they treat their prisoners there? She lowered her voice significantly. "It doesn't matter. You will never see the inside of the camp." He was perplexed. "What do you mean? Are they going to kill me?" She laughed aloud, then caught herself and lowered her voice again. "Just leave things to me. In a few hours, 3 of my younger nurses are going to distract the guards. If they do that effectively, I'll come get you. Be ready." And with that, she stood, pushed the chair back to the wall with its familiar raking sound, and headed for the door. He was awoken by a gentle shake on his good shoulder. He opened his eyes to see Edith. "Edith, what time is it?" She glanced over at the windows which lined the opposite wall. "It's dark. It's time to go." André sat up and looked around. Where are the guards? The 4 guards that always stood by the doors were gone. "What have you done?" She started to lift him from the bed. "Be quiet. I'm not sure how much time we have." He followed her lead and stood from the bed. She led him, still in his bedrobe, through one of the large sets of ornate doors at one end of the room. Once out of the infirmary, they made a quick right into a stairwell and started down. 1 flight, then 2, and eventually to the ground floor. Edith paused at the bottom, her head peeking out from the stairwell. He could see her breath hitch as she scanned the corridor, her eyes darting like a hunted animal. "Let's go. Quickly," she urged, grabbing his hand with a grip that was both reassuring yet urgent. They raced down the hallway, the shadows stretching and shifting around them as if alive. The oppressive silence was punctuated only by the sound of their hurried footsteps. She led him through a pair of swinging double doors, and they burst into the kitchen, the dim light from the moon filtering through the grimy windows, casting eerie shapes on the walls. The kitchen was a labyrinth of shadows and half-formed shapes, but there was no time to linger. They pressed on, weaving through the cluttered space until they reached the delivery door at the far end. He watched Edith's trembling hand as she opened it. André was taken aback at what he saw outside the delivery door. There before him was a wagon full of supplies, stationed there in the December snow, and a man in livery standing near it. He could see 2 horses. They were so quiet. How'd he pull that off, André wondered. André nodded his head, for indeed he did see crates in the wagon. They were buried under a mountain of what looked to be supplies, maybe laundry. The man continued, "They're rigged. They look like crates, but it's empty underneath." The man walked back down the steps and to the wagon. There, he pulled on a string that was attached to the crates. André watched in awe as the man revealed under all of the supplies there was indeed an opening. "What the?" he exclaimed. The man simply pointed. "Get in. We're running out of time." André shot Edith a glance. She looked panicked, and he felt like she would be that way until he and the wagon were safely away from the hospital. "Why me?" he asked her. She looked at him thoughtfully. "You aren't the only one, but you're the only one ready today." What an angel, he thought. "Thank you." She looked back into the darkness of the kitchen. "Don't thank me. Just go." She then disappeared into the darkness and shut the door. He climbed into the makeshift little hiding place. It was small and cramped, but who was he to complain? There was a blanket and a pillow. The man closed the little opening behind him, and soon André could feel the wagon start to move. It took 3 grueling weeks, 8 different wagons, and 6 clandestine safe houses before André finally crossed the border into the Netherlands. Each leg of the journey was fraught with danger, and he had learned to keep his questions to a minimum. When he had inquired why he wasn't being taken to France, his homeland, the guides had exchanged wary glances before explaining that the route was perilous. Too much fighting raged in both Belgium and France to risk the journey. He figured the guides were correct, so he never questioned it again. This morning, André stood gazing at the calm waters of the North Sea, the gentle waves lapping at the shore. A stark contrast to the turmoil that had engulfed his life just months before. He had been in the small village of Breskens for almost 10 months, a refuge that offered him safety and a semblance of peace. As he watched the horizon, thoughts of returning to France flickered through his mind. Was Sally all right? Did she think he was dead? He had not written to the woman he had hoped to one day make his bride because he didn't want to be thought of as a deserter or a coward. The idea of rejoining the fight tugged at him, a call to arms that felt both noble and reckless. Yet, as he reflected on everything Edith, her nurses, the guides, and those who operated the safe houses had done for him, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had risked their lives to help him escape the prospect of being held captive by the Germans, and the thought of throwing that sacrifice away seemed profoundly counterproductive. Why gain freedom only to undermine their efforts by dying on the battlefield? He wondered whatever happened to the others that were in the hospital that day. André decided that today he would visit the Café de Port, a small cafe nearby. He craved crepes and some coffee. He walked the 4 blocks from his small rented room to the cafe and seated himself in a corner. He saw a boy selling newspapers outside, so he beckoned the boy in and he bought one. He ordered strawberry crepes and apple slices and then proceeded to open the newspaper as he waited for his food. On page 4, he saw the headline to an article that made his chest hurt. British nurse Edith Cavell executed by German military. This has been World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show wherever you find this podcast, and don't forget to throw us a comment and a rating. We are on Facebook. Just search and like the official World War I Stories page. You can also join me on Blue Sky, where I go by the handle WW1Stories_HennyB. World War I Stories is now featured on Rabbit in Red Radio, with new episodes streaming Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. They also have all episodes available on demand. Visit Rabbit in Red Radio for this and many other independent podcasts. And last but not least, would you like your name read on the show? Become a producer by contributing to our Patreon at patreon.com/World War I Stories. I'm very grateful to everyone who downloads and listens to this show. I'm Henny B, and see you next time on World War I Stories.